One of the most hair-raising and polarizing theories about man and woman's original sin is the suggestion that the fruit in which Eve was beguiled to eat from may have not actually been a fruit at all, and was possibly something far more sinister. Over the last several hundred years, and possibly long before that, many people have pondered over the dubious nature of the events that took place within the Garden of Eden. Eating a fruit of any kind would be no sin today, and never was before. And did God really create a literal tree within the Garden of Eden called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Or are the tree and the fruit symbolic of something or somebody, as is done many, many times in the Bible? And did Eve and Adam take part in something far more heinous than simply eating a fruit? I'm Luke Caverns, and thank you so much for being here as we travel back anywhere from 14 to 200,000 years into our ancient origins. I'm going to preface this before we dive into what may be the darkest and most pivotal moment in our ancient history. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are undoubtedly at least indirectly tied to almost every other ancient religion. And at the end of this, you may see how they are not only indirectly tied to other ancient religions, but perhaps how the Abrahamic religions could be the catalyst for every other ancient religion, such as the Old Kingdom of Egypt, the Greek gods of Olympus, and especially the Anunnaki gods of Sumer. When looking at ancient religion as a whole, you see incredible feats and examples of agriculture, medicine, astronomy, and architecture. These ancient people were capable of some things that our modern sciences can only recently, if at all, replicate. It is undeniable that these ancient populations, such as the ancient Egyptians, the Sumerians, the ancient Greeks, and possibly even the Atlanteans, were highly intellectual, highly methodical, and very knowledgeable of the world around them. So they cannot be as easily brushed off as ancient people who were more naive or less knowledgeable than we are today. However, these extremely intellectual people were also highly religious and highly spiritual, which seems to be the opposite of what we see today, where scientifically inclined people tend to be more skeptical of religion as a whole. So what made the ancients different? Why were they so convicted of their beliefs? Why were their entire civilizations centered around the gods they worshipped? And furthermore, each of these ancient religions and civilizations are not only separated by geological location and distance, but they're also separated by time. Regardless of the distance or time of separation, we can observe that each of these civilizations built similar structures and worshipped similar gods. All of this alluding to a very unique silhouette of continuity among ancient religion. All of this to say that perhaps these ancient religions, Zoroastrianism, the Sumerians, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, Christians, all the way to Islam, are perhaps not as far apart or disconnected as we may think or have been taught. Perhaps our ancient past makes much more sense when we look into the possibility that our ancient ancestors were far more connected through time and distance than we ever realized. So bringing this back to Adam and Eve, what could they have done in place of eating a fruit that would have been so heinous that they would have been banished from the garden, and immediately following this, humans become so advanced, so vile, and so evil that God deemed it necessary to wash them all away with a massive flood? In the last video, we learned that oftentimes in the Bible, trees are used symbolically to describe nations, races, and individuals of people, as well as fruit being used many times to allude to sexual indiscretion. We have both of these elements here. If you were to look at this story through the traditional Judeo-Christian or perhaps Islamic perspective, this event seems rather disconnected in continuity from the rest of our known religious history. What other time in the Bible, Torah, or Quran do we hear of speaking animals in the way that the serpent speaks with Eve, Adam, and God himself? Could the term serpent just be symbolic to represent the evil, vile, and deceitful nature of the beast in the garden? And if it is symbolic, why can that same logic not be applied to the tree and the fruit? Furthermore, after Eve and Adam partake of the fruit, it says that their eyes were open and they realized that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves and hid from the presence of God. When God confronts them, they admit that they were ashamed of their nakedness, and God asks them, "Who told you that you were naked?" And then he immediately makes the connection to the tree in the garden and the fruit. He says, "Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you not to eat?" Why does so much of the context around the trees seem to be so sexual in nature? Why are they just now ashamed of their nakedness? Nakedness was not a sin before and nothing to be ashamed of. What did they do with their bodies that made them feel they needed to be shameful of their nakedness? If we take the text literally, the trivialization of their naked bodies is not very fitting after having only eaten a forbidden fruit. But What if it wasn't just a fruit? What if when Eve saw that the tree was a delight to her eyes and ate of its fruit, this is alluding to the fact that she found the serpent's physical body attractive and knew that if she ate of him, she would be granted the knowledge of good and evil and would become like the gods. Does that sound crazy? Well, let's jump to Genesis 6. Here it states that the sons of God, fallen angels, saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So we know for certain that the idea of fallen angels lowering and defiling themselves to sexually seduced women is something that is plainly stated in the Old Testament. But it should be restated that these fallen angels took to themselves wives any they chose, indicating that these angelic beings were very seductive and could easily beguile these ancient women into fornication. So we can see the idea that Eve could have been sexually seduced by the serpent is becoming more and more realistic. As the conversation between Yahweh, Eve, Adam, and the serpent continues, Yahweh curses the serpent and says, "I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and her offspring." We know for certain that he was speaking to the serpent here because he then addresses Eve, telling her that she will now experience pain during childbirth, and then addresses Adam, telling him that he will work the ground until the day he returns to the ground. What Yahweh is indicating here is that the serpent actually has an offspring with the woman. This is further vindicated by Yeshua, or Jesus himself, when he states, "If God were your father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from God, nor do I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you are not able to listen to my word. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do." And then again later in 1 John 3:11, "For this is the message you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. We should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother." Each of these verses are seldom touched by the church, as when you begin to dive into the true meaning behind each story, it begins to paint a picture of our ancient past that is not quite as simple as we have been taught. If you begin to ponder the idea that fallen angels interacted with ancient people on a regular basis, which is clearly stated in Genesis, as well as the possibility that the consequence of fallen angels breeding with ancient women is that our genetics may have been altered, giving us a wicked and sinful nature by default, if you ponder these things, the rest of ancient human history begins to make much, much more sense, and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ becomes that much more profound. To expand on this topic, we can look to the book of Enoch, which was quoted many times by Yeshua, or Jesus himself, and his apostles. It states in 1 Enoch chapter 6, "And it came to pass when the sons of men had increased, that in those days there were born to them fair and beautiful daughters. And the angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the children of men, and let us beget for ourselves children." Then in Enoch chapter 8, we learn which fallen angels taught ancient humans blacksmithing, geology, medicine, cosmetology, cosmology, black magic, astrology, meteorology, and so much more. When all of this is accounted for, and if you consider what is written in the book of Enoch to be true, it may very well adequately explain the pantheon of many other ancient gods, like the Greek gods of Olympus, the Annunaki of Samaria, the gods of the ancient Egyptians, and so on. All of this begins to paint a very large and comprehensive picture that inherently points back to one very specific event in time: Eve eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When all of the events that take place after the story of Adam and Eve are considered, does it not seem more likely that Eve may have defiled herself with a beautiful and seductive fallen angel who told her that if she were to eat of his fruit, she may become like him and like God? In light of everything we know, does this not seem more plausible, more meaningful, more vile, and more fitting for our original sin rather than having eaten a forbidden fruit? And lastly, given everything we know from Genesis 6 and the writings of Enoch, let's read Genesis 3, and let me know if the lens by which you read this scene are not entirely different. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field. This is potentially indicating the fact that the serpent himself was not the only fallen angel living amongst Adam and Eve. The serpent said to Eve, "Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the tree in the garden, but God said, You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." Which is interesting. Why is merely touching the fruit so heinous? Unless, of course, this touching is symbolic for a sexual act, then it makes perfect sense. But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was a delight to her eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, which may very well indicate that Adam took part in this as well. And immediately afterwards, the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. So again, with everything that we know, is it so far-fetched to propose that Eve and potentially Adam as well could have been beguiled, which is literally translated to being sexually seduced? Is it so far-fetched to say that the eating of the fruit could be a symbolic, simplified story indicating the beginning of an era which has already been confirmed to have happened? Could Eve have set the precedent for fallen angels to begin to tempt and seduce ancient women? And could these fallen angels, as well as their children, have made gods of themselves across the earth? Could these gods in fact be the pantheon of ancient gods we see across so many ancient civilizations? I'm Luke Caverns, and we'll learn more about the gods who taught men and women the ways of the world next time on Ancient Origins. Alright, so responding to some of my favorite comments from the last video, were Adam and Eve the only people in the Garden of Eden? First up is this comment by Supreme Shaggy. Okay, so one thing I just want to address is I do have my notes right here in front of me. I do think that in the future I will be able to remedy this in some way. A lot of the times YouTubers who make content like this do in fact read from their notes, but it's not as noticeable when they're further away from the camera. But I like for my videos to have a very personal and intimate feeling. And also, thank you, Shaggy, for the encouragement. This channel, Ancient Origins, is the reason I wanted to get started with YouTube in the first place. And I feel like so far we're really building a very strong and tight-knit community. It's still a small community, but literally everyone here comes from a different background or religion. But at the end of the day, we're all very open-minded and interested in the mysteries of our ancient past. So this next comment is from Free and T, I believe, stating that often people with a Christian or Jewish background seem to only explain stories from their own perspective when there is also relevant information of the event within the Quran. And this is very true. And over my last two videos, I've not touched too much on the Quran. And this is due to the fact that I'm just talking about the fallen angels potentially leading into becoming the pantheon of ancient gods within ancient religions that we know of. However, those gods do possibly tie into the jinn, just not by the same means, based on my knowledge of what the Quran has to say about the free will of angels. But thank you so much for leaving the comment. I certainly very, very much appreciate your support. And last but certainly not least, Rafay, I've really appreciated all of your love and support. It's really so eye-opening to me that so many people from an entirely different background would resonate with what I'm saying, even if they disagree with me on certain aspects. So much of my support thus far has come from the Islamic community, and it's just been honestly very humbling. I know it requires so much thought and understanding of nuance to support and listen to someone who may disagree with you on some notable levels. And your support, as well as everyone else's support, is just so very much appreciated by myself as well as my family. And if you're still hanging around, thank you so much for supporting me. And I cannot wait to dive deeper and deeper into this wild ride of ancient mysteries with all of you. So I'm about to go on vacation to visit my parents for a bit in the Smokies. And while I'm there, I'm going to be writing the next 2 episodes of Ancient Origins. So if you want to hang out on a bit more of a regular basis, then please feel free to come find me over on TikTok. It's Luke Caverns, or Instagram. It's just Luke Caverns. And TikTok is where I post all kinds of mini videos about similar topics, getting into some details that I may have not mentioned in these long format videos. Feel free to leave comments asking questions. I try to video reply to some of the most interesting comments, of course. If you comment, please tell me that you came from Ancient Origins, because I'll see it and I will reply to you. Anyways, I'm Luke Caverns. You guys be safe, and we'll see you all again very, very soon.